Next week, we celebrate the anniversary of the bombing of Tokyo. April 18th, 1942, the Americans bombed Tokyo with Jimmy Doolittle and his raiders. It's an incredible story. If you haven't reread it, it's incredible. What they did was, there was all these bombers. They were B-25s. They were called the Billy Mitchell bombers, named after a great uncle of mine. That's true. And they took these bombers off, and they went to Tokyo and bombed Tokyo, but they did not have enough gas to get back. They knew they had to keep going into China. Well, China was half controlled by Chiang Kai-shek, who was pro-American, and half controlled by the Japanese. And they didn't know who controlled what. And a lot of these bombers went down in Japanese-controlled land. And they were held as prisoners of war from 1942 to 1945. One of the men who was held was a man named Jacob. DeShazer. Jacob DeShazer was held. They beat him. They tortured him. They didn't give him food. They killed other people around him. He was about to be executed, but they chose not to. He hated his guards. He hated the Japanese. He hated the Japanese people. He hated everyone. One of his best friends died, and after that, they gave some English books kind of to appease the people, the POWs. They gave them some English books. The only ones they had, somehow they captured, the Japanese, and one of them was a Bible. So Jacob DeShazer had nothing to do. He read the Bible, and he read the story of the gospel, the cross of Jesus Christ. And then he read in Romans, it says, if you confess with your mouth and believe in your heart and confess and speak, that you'll be saved. Sorry, I didn't say that right, but you know what I mean. And he became a believer. He said instantly, the veil was dropped. He uses those words. I saw the interview from a few years ago. He died 8 years ago at 95. The veil dropped. He no longer hated his prison guards. He no longer hated the Japanese army. He no longer hated the Japanese people. Well, 3 years later, you know the story. The Allies win. He is liberated, comes back to America, finishes college, and decides to go back to Japan as a missionary. Wow. Goes back to Japan, and he's sharing the Lord. He draws up, so he doesn't speak Japanese at that point. I think he did eventually. He drew a tract, which is a little biography, a little 5-page folded biography, and handed it everywhere in Japanese. And there was a man who found one. His name was Mitsuo Fuchida. Mitsuo Fuchida was the guy who led the raid on Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941. He was the guy in front. Then a few days later, he led the raid in Hong Kong. And then a few years later, led the raid in Manila. This was the war hero, Mitsuo Fuchida. Now, DeShazer is now a hero, and Mitsuo Fuchida is now no longer a hero. It's 1948, and he almost was put in prison because of, war crimes, and he was stationed in Hiroshima. The day that the bomb came over Hiroshima, he had gone to Tokyo just for the day. He survived. He read that tract. He said, this man used to hate everyone, and he read a Bible. He was hating everybody. He said, I'm going to read a Bible. And Mitsuo Fuchida read the Bible, found a Bible in Japanese, read it, and came to the Lord. The two men met, Jacob and Mitsuo, and there they forgave each other. One bombing Pearl Harbor, the other bombing Tokyo, and both as a representative of their countries hugged and worked together for about 20 years sharing the gospel in Japan. 1976, Fuchida died, and Jacob said it was one of the saddest days of his life because his best friend had died. You see, forgiveness goes deep. Forgiveness goes deep. Jacob of old was forgiven by God and was forgiven by his brother. The Jacob of World War II that I just shared had the forgiveness of God and the veil of hatred dropped. God will forgive you, and the veil of hatred, the veil of fear, whatever veil is on you will drop. You just have to believe in his son, Jesus Christ. Let's pray.